Hello and welcome to another episode of Biological. This video explains single and double covalent bonding. It follows on from my video on elements, compounds and bonding, so you might want to check that out first if you haven't already. So we've already seen that atoms contain a nucleus of positively charged particles called protons, and the number of protons present is called the atomic number. So for every positive proton, there is normally a negatively charged electron that orbits around it. So the atom's got no overall charge if the electrons orbiting the nucleus, or fixed rotations around it, equals the number of positive protons. These electron orbits, or shells, contain a fixed number of electrons. The inner shell has got a maximum of 2 electrons that it can hold. The next shell up has got 8 that it can hold, and then the maximum for the next shell, or third one, is again 8. So when an inner orbit, or shell, is filled up with electrons, we simply move up to the next shell and start filling that as well. Let's look at some examples. Hydrogen has 1 positive proton and 1 negative electron. But unlike most atoms, it has no neutrons, but these don't have a charge anyway. So with 1 positive proton and 1 negative electron, the charges are balanced. But the atom doesn't have a full outer shell of 2 electrons. So hydrogen always wants to gain an electron to fill its outer shell and become less reactive and therefore more stable. So it could do this by bonding with another hydrogen to form a molecule of hydrogen, or H2. But if we add another proton plus 2 neutrons and an electron to our hydrogen atom, we'll actually change to a new element, helium. Again, there's no overall charge as 2 positive protons cancel out the 2 negative electrons. But this time we have a full outer shell of electrons, so this makes helium relatively unreactive and stable. In fact, helium is in a group on the periodic table known as a noble or inert gases, because they don't react very easily because they have this full outer shell of electrons, and therefore have stable atomic structures. So hydrogen then is more reactive than helium because it's only got 1 electron in its outer shell and really wants another one. We describe the number of electrons needed to fill the outer shell using the term valency. The valency or combining power of hydrogen is 1, as it needs 1 more electron in its outer shell to fill it. You can think of valency as just being replaced really by the word vacancy. So we have a vacant position available we want to fill with another electron to gain that full outer shell. Carbon then has 4 electrons in its outer shell and needs another 4 then to be full. So carbon in this case has a valency, or vacancy if we like, of 4 electrons. Carbon can therefore bond, or holds hands with if you like, 4 other electrons to gain a full outer shell. So in this molecule, carbon is covalently bonded with 4 hydrogens to form a stable molecule. Each hydrogen shares an electron, and the carbon shares its 4 electrons with 4 hydrogen atoms, who have 1 electron each, to gain a full outer shell of 8 electrons. Each of these single bonds between the carbon and the hydrogens can be represented by a single line. This stable molecule is methane, or natural gas, that we use in homes for cooking and for heating. It is also the gas produced by methanogenic bacteria within cows. So because carbon has a valency of 4, it can combine or bond with itself and a wide variety of other elements to fill its shell by forming molecules. Carbon can form ring structures, as in glucose. These ring structures can covalently bond via glycosidic bonds to form larger molecules like the disaccharide maltose, and then go on to form giant molecules such as starch, the energy reserve molecule produced by plants, glycogen, which is the animal's way of storing glucose in liver and muscles, or cellulose, the building block of cell walls in plants. All of these are examples of polysaccharides. Carbon can also be found in amino acids that link together to form polypeptides, and they then fold to form proteins. Carbon is also the building block of fatty acid chains. that with glycerol form fats or lipids. But carbon can also form double bonds by sharing more than one electron with another atom, or holding hands twice if you like. The double bond is written as two lines between the atoms. In carbon dioxide, carbon bonds twice, or shares two electrons with each of the two oxygen atoms. So carbon is now stable with a full outer shell of 8 electrons, as it's now sharing 4 electrons, and both oxygen atoms are stable as they gain the 2 electrons they need to complete their outer shell. In the poisonous gas carbon monoxide, one carbon shares 2 of its electrons with one oxygen atom, and the oxygen shares 4 of its electrons. This forms a triple bond, represented by 3 lines between the carbon and the oxygen atom. This is one of the strongest covalent bonds commonly found. We can see the effects of single and double carbon bonds in the fatty acid chains of lipids or fats. As carbon forms single bonds with each other and hydrogens to form a saturated fat, it's called a saturated fat as the carbons all have the maximum number of hydrogens attached. You can't actually add any more. There are no more free electrons to form bonds. It's a bit like if you're saturated with water, you've been out in the rain, you can't physically get any wetter. You are absolutely saturated. But if one carbon double bonds with another, we'll lose hydrogens, as the electrons that were bonding them to the carbon are now being used to form the second bond to this carbon. So if we've lost hydrogens, we form an unsaturated fat. This significantly alters the properties of unsaturated fatty acids, and therefore the lipid molecules they form. You can see it takes up more space, and then the molecules can't intermolecular bond as well as they could have done if they were saturated, as they're no longer straight. But more on this another time. I've been Jongle. This has been another episode of Biological, where we make the study of life a little bit more, well, logical. Till next time.